And it's true that in the global order of things, state bureaucrats are not necessarily rich. And a few have very good salaries, as we read sometimes in the press, but nothing to compare with wits kids in you know, the city of London, traders in Manhattan, and so on. Yes, but neither were many aristocrats. Many aristocrats were not rich. They had very small estates and so on. It is not how much you earn that makes the difference between the exploiters and the exploited. It is how you earn it. And again, I go back to this. I mean, do you earn it through, you know, taxation, extortion, and so on, or do you earn it through voluntary exchanges? The other argument that the ruling class would say is we are not the exploiters, we are appointed by the people. It is democracy. And the argument of democracy, of course, the ideology of democracy, part of the ruling class's ideology, is, you know, the one that we hear, especially in this country, as absolute, you know, legitimization of the state. And it's a powerful trick. I mean, Nietzsche recognized the imposture, saying, coldly, the state tells lies, and this lies crawls out of his mouth. I, the state, am the people. And of course, the state is not the people. And the ruling class, you know, we vote, we change governments. But the ruling class is still there. You know, there are a few ministers that change and so on. But the ruling class, as Bourdieu explained, you know, analyzing the French situation, the ruling class continues and it reproduces itself. I mean, you know, you may have someday a bricklayer who becomes an ambassador. But how many sons of ambassadors become bricklayers? It doesn't happen. So there is a continuity in the ruling class's domination. And the third argument that the ruling class will tell you is that we cannot be the oppressors. We are at the service of the people. You know, as our name implies, you know, we are civil servants. And the argument is certainly one that sticks. The feudal lords, of course, performed service, you know, military, judiciary, and they were sponsors of the art, as the church, you know, provided education, hospitals, charity. But today, the ruling class will say, will argue, and many people will believe, that without the state and without its bureaucracy, we would die in the streets of starvation, we would have no education, we would have no hospitals, and we would have no arts. Nobody would, you know, finance the opera or buy libraries or places like this here. So the ruling class sort of legitimization is not what it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and so on. It sort of changes. It's not bringing civilization to savages as it was, you know, in colonial powers sort of 150 years ago. It's not defending the country against invaders, maybe a bit in America, but it's not like, you know, what it was under the Cold War, what it was when Nazi Germany was threatening this country, and so on. It is not creating the new city on the hill, the new Jerusalem, a new utopia. That was what, you know, the early democracies were trying to achieve, or, you know, the socialist states and so on. But the legitimizing discourse, the legitimizing purpose, objective, is take money from one group of people to give it to another. Gabriel Ininarity, who is a very interesting philosopher of the left, he writes in Basque, unfortunately, so you have to wait until his books are translated, but it's a political statement for him writing in Basque. And he says, the main purpose of the state is the production and distribution of collective goods that are necessary for the function of society. Now, if you decrypt that smooth language, the meaning is simply, it is the organization of large-scale robbery. That's what, you know, the combined ideology of democracy and socialism gives you. And that ideology is certainly triumphant. I mean, every respectable country in the world today, you know, what we call the countries, the OECD countries and so on, is ruled by one party, by a single party. They are all one-party states. Social democracies, you know, social democracy is a bit on the right, social democracy is a bit on the left, but they are also social democracies. And at this point, I would like to bring up two sort of dissident ideas. And one, that social democracies, these one-party states, are bankrupt, and we already read about it in the newspapers and so on, but it's becoming more and more a fact, it's becoming more and more something that people realize. And the second point is why, despite being bankrupt, the state remains sacred. And I weigh my words here. I'm really going to use the word sacred, the sacredness of the state. Why are social democracies bankrupt? I think that today, historically, the welfare state, in the form that we know it today, started really with Bismarck in the 1870s, 1880s. And Bismarck was the first among the leading statesmen to take socialism seriously. He said, there is a risk of revolution. And the way to counter revolution is throw money at the workers. People don't go to the street, they don't take to the streets, they don't do a revolution when they have full stomachs. So, pay them. 1870s, 1880s, people say, revolution. 1905, get a bit nervous, Potemkin and all these sort of things, and so on. 1917, and the storming of the Winter Palace, then suddenly the capitalists, the bourgeois class, people who have property and money, started to raise, an eyebrow and say, hey, something is happening there in the Soviet Union. And then you had the collapse of the market and so on, 1929, massive unemployment, and people said, yes, revolution is certainly threatening us. In Germany, they pushed Hitler. In the United States, they said, let's have a New Deal. And in these countries, they started putting money over to the laboring classes and so on. In 1945, the Soviets are on the Elbe. They are 300 kilometers from Strasbourg. All the capitalists said, pay them. Give them more money. Give them more money. Social security, everything they want, pay them. We don't want the socialists, the Soviets, taking power here. And now we come to 1989. Soviet Union collapses, and the capitalists turn to the state bureaucracy and so on and says, thank you very much. Well, you've done a good job. We don't need you anymore, and we are moving our factory to Malaysia, to China, and so on. And the state bureaucracy says, well, hang on there. We have commitments, we have pension plans, we have promised, the NHS, we have promised all these sort of things. That's your problem, mate. But I'm moving my factory to China. So suddenly, welfare states, social democracies, and so on, are left with these huge commitments that they have made and losing their tax base. I think that is, in a way, an analysis of what's happened. I mean, the alliance of people with money, with people with guns, is falling apart. The alliance of capitalists, bourgeois capitalists, property, and so on, and the state bureaucracy is falling apart. And the state bureaucracy is left without its tax revenues. So why, when the state is clearly going bankrupt, why is it still considered to be sort of sacred? And when I'm, because I mean, I go back to this word because what I'm going to say is probably controversial, but its merit is that it is true. The people's attachment to the state is of a religious nature. It is rooted in their subconscious. And the reason people believe that the state is sacred is simply because states kill. They kill, and it is because states kill, that they become legitimate. And let me unpack a bit this idea, because I think it's amusing.